In the Survivor lexicon, I feel like the all-girls alliance is almost like mythologized at this point.
The concept of a women's alliance is a concept as old as alliances on Survivor. The very first alliance ever created, in fact, was a women's alliance, forged in episode 1 of the first season, Borneo. Let's go back for a minute to May 31st, 2000. The Tagi tribe had 8 members and was going to the very first tribal council to vote out someone. An alliance was proposed of Sonia, Stacy, Sue, and Kelly, 4 of the 8 tribe members. They wanted to vote out Rudy, the oldest member of the tribe. Because the men of the tribe were disorganized, the 4 of them would have carried the vote easily, taking control of the game and perhaps the season.
We've been talking about strategy and, who's not contributing as much and who would be best to vote off. And I think we've come to a mutual decision, and we've talked to Sue about it.
However, before the vote, Sue flipped to work with Rich, Rudy, and Sean, and they voted out Sonia 4-3-1.
She's like, oh, I think we're going to vote for Rudy and vote him off because he's so barking. Well, anybody's too barking too bossy is Stacy because she doesn't move her ass. These chicks think I'm voting for one person and I'm not.
Stacy, another member of the Women's Alliance, would become the second person voted out of this tribe. The 2 remaining members, Sue and Kelly, would make it to Final 4, where Kelly betrayed Sue.
Sue. Thanks, sweetie.
I'm ready to go.
And then Sue used her swing jury vote to ensure that Kelly would lose in the finals to a man.
What goes around comes around. It's here. I was your friend at the beginning of this, really thinking that you were a true friend. I was willing to be sitting there and put you next to me. But if I were to ever pass you along in life again, and you were laying there dying of thirst, I would not give you a drink of water.
And just like that, in 2 votes, the very first Women's Alliance went from controlling the game itself to cannibalizing itself, all 4 of them betraying each other in turn. Ever since that first season in Borneo, women's alliances, and their failures, have remained a darkly comic recurring joke throughout Survivor history. Chekhov's law says that if a gun is introduced in the first act of a story, that gun must be fired before the movie ends. It is an almost equally powerful adage on Survivor that if a women's alliance is created in the first act, a woman will be voted out in the third. With a few notable exceptions that only appear to have instilled the fear of God in men for decades to come, women's alliances are perhaps one of the most cursed Survivor concepts, a portent of doom for all involved. So today, I decided to rank every women's alliance in Survivor history, including some of its international variants, from most successful to least successful. And when I say least successful, that's putting it mildly. Of the 26 entries on this list, only 4 of them are unambiguously successful. Another few managed to succeed at a single vote before falling apart. At about the halfway mark on this list, we have alliances that fall apart within the very same episode that they're formed and end with members voting for each other. And the bottom 5 of this list are some truly cursed alliances. Alliances that directly cause the doom of everyone involved in them.
The girl strong is not a thing.
You made it not a thing!
I should start by setting some terms, as I usually do. I'm defining a women's alliance as a group of at least 3 women who all promise to work together, where that deal does not include any men. That means a powerful duo of women do not count as an alliance, nor does an alliance of 4 women and 1 man. For example, Heidi and Jenna on Amazon are a strong, unbreakable duo, but not a women's alliance by themselves. Neither is the Villains Alliance of Parvati, Jerry, Sandra, and Danielle a women's alliance because Russell is an equal part of that alliance and he is not a woman. There's a few odd edge cases that I'll call out or mention in honorable mentions as we go, alliances that may not count as a true women's alliance but feel like one for lack of a better term, but for the most part the rankings will focus on groups of at least 3 women, and only women, who promise to work together on the show. That term, on the show, is important. I know that modern Survivor players probably promise to work with anyone and everyone on the beach, and people may talk in their exit interviews about secret alliances or deals we never saw on the show. I think that's well and good, and probably true. I also realistically cannot rank things that I never witnessed, so the Women's Alliance needs to have been formalized on the TV show to be included in these rankings. Finally, there's a couple players included in these women's alliances who have since come out as transgender or non-binary. I will try to use their correct pronouns in this video, but within the framework of determining what counts as a women's alliance, they are still included as women because that is what they identified as at the time of filming. Hopefully that makes sense. As far as rankings go, I try to keep my rankings as objective as possible, so I focused on quantifiable aspects of what makes any alliance good. This includes average final placement of alliance members. Does the winner come from this group? How many players were left when the alliance formed? For example, a group of 5 that forms on day 1 and makes the final 5 together is much more impressive than a group of 5 that forms at the final 7 and makes the final 5 together. But most impressive of all is that the group of 5 actually stuck to it and made the final 5 together, which brings us to questions about the integrity of the alliance. How often did this group have power? Did they use that power to vote out their enemies or to vote out each other? Did they vote together at every vote, or did they have different targets and often split their votes? And when members of the alliance made the final tribal council, how often did jury members vote for their former allies to win? Many of these questions are too qualitative to boil down to a simple score or statistic the way I did for idle plays or challenge prowess, but hopefully this gives you some insight into how I thought about these rankings. You'll hear these considerations in many of my descriptions of why certain alliances are ranked over others. Oh, and before I get started, big shout out to user LeakTurbulent2360 on the Survivor Reddit for creating a database of all the US-based women's alliances. My final list looks quite a bit different than theirs, but I used their list as a helpful starting point, so I wanted to make sure to credit them. Last but not least, this video will contain spoilers for a whole bunch of seasons, specifically these ones. I'm assuming most people have seen most of the US season, so I'll specifically highlight that there are spoilers in this video for a few international Survivor seasons, including the Australian Survivor seasons 2016, Champions vs. Contenders 2, Brains vs. Brawn 2, and Australian Survivor vs. The World, and the South Africa seasons Santa Carolina, Philippines, and Island of Secrets. You have been warned. Likewise, this video was made in between the air dates for Survivor 49 and Survivor 50, so if anything, if a women's alliance got formed on Survivor 50, I don't know about that. If something happened on 51, I don't know about that. I can only report up to 49, so that's what we're doing here. Normally, rankings go from worst to best, but I think it's much more interesting in this case to start with the best and then go down to the worst, mostly because I think the best ones are pretty obvious. So let's begin with the best women's alliance of all time, and I don't think anyone can reasonably argue against it. The Black Widow Brigade, a 5-person women's alliance formed of Parvati, Amanda, Cirie, Natalie, and Alexis on Survivor Micronesia, Fans vs. Favorites, is one of the best and most legendary Survivor alliances of all time. The Eric blindside is their ultimate move, and perhaps the greatest strategic move in the history of Survivor.
I want to give individual immunity to Natalie.
Which is why clips of this move get shown roughly once every 5 seasons on Survivor, if not more frequently. But it's far from the Alliance's only move. They are also responsible for the blindside on Ozzy at 9, itself disguised as a blindside on Jason, followed up by an actual blindside on Jason at 8. After James gets medevaced at 7, the Black Widow Brigade is forced to turn on itself at 6 after Eric, the last man standing outside the Alliance, wins immunity. And it looks like they're going to have to do so again at 5, at least until they trick Eric into giving away his immunity.
You're crazy. You officially go down as the dumbest survivor ever in the history of Survivor ever.
The significance of this is that this alliance of 5 never turns on itself unless there is no other option. Alexis and Amanda catch votes at 6 only because Eric is immune, and 4 of the 5 reach the final 4 together. It goes without saying, then, that this alliance also makes up the winner, both of the final 2, and 3 of the 7 jury members, all of whom vote for Parvati to win in the end. The only possible knock you could make against this alliance being the best women's alliance of all time is that it didn't form until the final 9. But I think its unbreaking loyalty and impressive strategic maneuvers, to put it mildly, push it over the top. Moreover, I think when people think of women's alliances, they think of this. When male players talk about being scared of a women's alliance, they think of the Black Widow Brigade flirting with Ozzy before voting him out, or tricking Eric and Jason with their feminine wiles. When female players talk about wanting to make a women's alliance, they think of the Black Widow Brigade using their wits to outplay a field of strong, powerful, cocky men and send them all to jury, leaving just 4 confident women in the final 4 for the first time in the show's history. Before the Black Widow Brigade, only 7 women's alliances had ever been attempted, and only one that lasted for more than 1 episode, and that was on a season with men versus women starting tribes. After this, women's alliances become a regular talking point on Survivor. And this has effects on the strategy. Men fear them and try to vote women out at the first sign of any women's alliance. Women try to start or even force women's alliances for the sake of having a women's alliance. Both of these effects, I think, are what ultimately lead to women's alliances becoming such a cursed prospect, something that today feels almost doomed from the start. That's not to say that there aren't success stories, but if you're trying to pinpoint the reasons for the failure of so many women's alliances, I do think it's directly related to the over-the-top success and popularity of the ultimate women's alliance, the Black Widow Brigade. That's not a knock against the Black Widow Brigade. That's a proof of the greatness of the Black Widow Brigade. And that's why it's number 1 on the list. The only one I think even comes close is the One World Women's Alliance, also frequently known as Kim's Alliance, which contained Kim, Sabrina, Chelsea, Alicia, Kat, and Christina. Though perhaps not the most popular alliance in Survivor history, it is one of the most successful. This is an alliance that emerges from a tribe of all women, as One World was pitched as a battle of the sexes season. Kim and Sabrina led the charge in building the alliance on day 1, and soon their ranks were rounded out with Chelsea, Alicia, and Kat. Of the other 4 women left out of this alliance, 1 was medically evacuated and 2 were voted out pre-merge. That left only Christina on the outs, and she was brought into the alliance at the merge as a peripheral member. Kim, Sabrina, and Chelsea, the alliance's core, consider early on whether they should abandon the women to go with the men of their swap tribe, but ultimately they choose to side with the women. From there, this alliance dominates, sending 5 straight men to the jury and containing all of the final 5. The alliance does have a few hiccups, though only minor ones. At the final 8, the majority split the vote between their target, Troyzan, and one of their own in Christina. Christina also rogue votes for Chelsea at that tribal, which seems fair enough since she was being split on. Then, at the final 7, the women could finish the job and take out the last man in Tarzan, making their 6 the final 6. However, they instead unanimously turn on Kat and vote her out, before returning to finish off Tarzan at 6. I do think it's worth noting that even when this alliance turns on its own, they do so unanimously as a united front, which strongly suggests that Kat was the problem rather than stir-crazy disloyalty. Or rather, that's just how loyal they were to Kim. Kim is the ringleader who runs this alliance. She's never once in any real danger, and she gets to the end with Chelsea and Sabrina, her toughest possible competition, and still wins 7-2-0. This is a far less collaborative effort than the Black Widow Brigade, who all brought something to the table, which is why I think it ranks less highly in most people's imaginations. Still, it's undeniably one of the most successful women's alliances in Survivor history, possibly the most successful from a results-oriented standpoint, and it deserves the number 2 spot. At number 3, we've got another alliance from a starting women's tribe on a men versus women season, Vanuatu. Specifically, the alliance of Leanne, Amy, Twyla, and Scout, which later brings in Julie and Eliza during the tribe swap. The women's tribe, Yasser, early on is split down the middle between 2 groups. One side is Eliza, Mia, Lisa, and Julie, and the other side is Leanne, Amy, Twyla, and Scout, with Dolly as the indecisive swing in the middle. This stalemate is broken when Eliza goes full cast from Cagayan and swings to Amy's side to help them take out Dolly. Eliza didn't intend to fully flip, though, and doesn't realize that by doing so, she's handed all the power to the older women of the tribe. They use that power to pick off Mia as well. At the swap, Eliza gets formally ushered into the alliance, giving the women numbers enough on new Yasser to vote out Travis and Lisa. Twyla and Julie also bond on new Lopevi, setting up Julie to join the rest of the women's alliance at the merge. The now 6 women strong alliance steamrolls the first 3 merge votes, but then turns on itself at the final 7 instead of taking out the only straggler in Chris.
I think Chris should go next, but it's not setting really well for Leanne, so if she decides that it's not right, then I'm going to stick with what she says.
All right, we made our decision.
All right.
This, in hindsight, turns out to be a game-losing move for the Alliance.
It is crazy. I don't even have to do something to change the tide of the game. There's 6 women living with me. They'll change it themselves.
Amy and Leanne decide to blindside Eliza at the vote, causing Scout and Twyla to turn on Amy and Leanne, the Alliance's core, blindsiding Leanne and setting off a series of dominoes that ends in Chris winning and perhaps the greatest group choke in a Survivor history.
You question a woman's character, you question a woman's ability, she'll snap your neck. You open up your heart, show a woman you're vulnerable, then they start thinking with their heart. That's when they open up that back door.
Scout and Twyla stay loyal to each other all the way to the final 3, but most of the other women on the jury feel burned by Twyla's betrayal. Despite the women making up 5 of the 7 jury members, only Amy and Scout vote for Twyla. 3 of the women, plus the 2 men on jury, vote for Chris to win over Twyla in the end. If the women of Yasser had stuck together and finished out the season, they would be second or maybe even first in the overall ranking. As it is, letting Chris dismantle the Alliance and win is an extremely avoidable error that represents a massive black mark on the Alliance's long-term reputation. Still, for the dominance they exhibited for about 80% of the game, the women of Vanuatu's post-merge still make up the 3rd best women's alliance of all time. I think there's one more unambiguously great women's alliance left, and it's one that I doubt most people have ever heard of. Number 4 comes from Survivor South Africa Santa Carolina, one of the South African version's earliest editions. Santa Carolina is an odd season, a celebrity season that began with an uneven number of men and women, 10 men and 8 women. Now, by the time it was the final 9, only 3 women were left. If you weren't watching this video, then it might surprise you to learn that the season's endgame was dominated by a late-game women's alliance, the Spa Alliance. In episode 9, at the final 8, the only 3 women remaining formed a secret alliance. 42-year-old exotic dancer Gigi, 42-year-old TV presenter Ashley, and 24-year-old TV presenter Sade went on a spa reward together. Though these 3 were all from different alliances and had never worked together before, they bonded on the trip. At the end, Ashley proposed they create a secret alliance, using their connections to play both sides and protect each other.
It would give me such a perverse sense of satisfaction to have all these alpha males busy bickering and quarreling and, you know what I mean, thinking that they're the top dog and the this and the that.
We go through.
And just to snaffle it from under their noses.
Are you going to expect us to make a mark against them?
No, you don't have to. That's the thing. You don't have to vote against your own people. All you have to do is vote for my people.
That's fine.
And then by the time it gets to 3-3, it's too late.
Cheers. Cheers. To the ladies, maybe to the cheers. Yeah.
One key way that they kept this alliance a secret was that the women very rarely voted together. Instead, they would share information and, having agreed on the target, would either vote for them or strategically throw their votes onto someone else. In this early era of Survivor South Africa, ties were broken based on who had the most previous votes cast against them. So the women strategically threw rogue votes at the other male players in the game in order to ensure that the men would lose ties if they ever came up against the women. The alliance worked well, and for 4 straight votes, the women took out the men until only 1 was left. It's also worth noting that during this time, Ashley was on an incredible comp streak, winning 5 straight immunity challenges.
I respect you and I like you immensely, but you have been getting a little too close for comfort in the last 2 immune challenges, and I do not want you snatching away a place in the final from me.
At the final 4, Ashley and Gigi turned on Sade, fearing that she could beat Ashley at the final 3 competition, before eliminating the last man in 3rd place. Gigi then beat Ashley 6-3 in what many would argue was a bitter jury vote against Ashley. The fact that the alliance wasn't formed until the last few episodes, and the fact that they unnecessarily turned on each other at 4, keeps this women's alliance from being in the top 3 overall. But the fact that it was a secret alliance that successfully controlled the game, resulting in 3 of the final 4 and both of the final 2, makes the Spa Alliance unambiguously one of the most successful women's alliances in Survivor history. At number 5 is the Champions Trio from Australian Survivor Champions vs. Contenders 2. Janine, Pia, and Abby start the game on the Champions tribe. This trio works together relatively early on after Abby flips on the Sporty 7 Alliance to join Janine and Pia and others. They are concretized as a trio starting around the tribe swap, where all 3 of them move over together to the new Contenders Beach. There they basically control the swap tribe together, make it to the merge, and run the majority alliance for much of the game. They stick together through 7 votes, plus several pre-merge rounds where they won immunity and didn't go to tribal. All in all, about 12 episodes, which is a very long time for any alliance to stay loyal, let alone a women's alliance. That said, once the alliance starts to crumble, it crumbles very quickly. At the first final 7, don't ask, Abby flips with Luke against Janine and Pia, resulting in their affiliate number, Simon, leaving, and Abby votes against Janine herself at the final 6 to send her home. The next round, Pia helps Luke vote out Abby at the final 5. Pia does ultimately go on to win the game unanimously, though, securing the jury votes of Janine and Abby. Ultimately, this trio ends up being very similar to something like the Vanuatu Women's Alliance, but smaller, and therefore a little less powerful and requiring more participation with others. This long-lived alliance falls short of the endgame, but it's largely successful and results in a winner. Number 6 is where things start getting a bit murkier, and I wouldn't blame you if you have differences of opinion in where you would rank some of these groups versus where I would rank them. But it's my list, so I have to come up with an order. So at number 6, I'm going to award the Witches' Coven from Survivor Second Chances. This alliance partially forms in episode 6 during the last pre-swap tribal at the final 14, with Cass, Abby Maria, and Sierra teaming up with Spencer to save Abby and vote out Wu. At the merge, Spencer defects away, but Kelly Wentworth joins the alliance, only for Cass to be immediately voted out by the majority. The remaining trio of Abby Maria, Wentworth, and Sierra go on to have a bit of a run in the game. They remain mostly on the bottom of the season's fluid hierarchies, but they gain some traction as a voting bloc faction before ultimately being broken up by an idol play that takes out Sierra. Abby and Wentworth stick together for a few more rounds, with Abby Maria ultimately finishing in 7th and Wentworth in 4th, just short of the final tribal council. The Witches' Coven never really amasses power, but on a season like Cambodia, they were fairly useful as a voting bloc, and most importantly, for the purposes of this ranking, they were extremely loyal to each other. Aside from Wentworth throwing a stray vote at Cass at the merge vote, nobody in this alliance ever turned on or voted against each other, and they almost always voted together in lockstep. That's more than many of the alliances ranked above them can say, and at this point in the rankings, that is enough for 6th place. At number 7, we have the original Yasa alliance of Evie, Liana, and Tiffany from Survivor 41. It's a little unclear from the edit when this trio becomes united, whether it's before or after the first vote against Eric Abraham, but they are certainly working as a unit by episode 2. That's when Evie tells Tiffany and Liana about Xander's advantage, and they take out Voce. This trio holds true for the rest of the pre-merge, though that's not saying much since they never went to tribal council during that time. However, this alliance falls apart after Liana goes on a journey with Shan and decides to betray all of her old allies to jump ship and work with the Black Cross-Tribal Alliance that Shan builds at the merge. Liana tries to betray her old allies by stealing Xander's idol with knowledge is power and blindsiding Evie, but Tiffany and Evie are prepared and foil her plan. Still, the damage is done. Liana votes out Tiffany and Evie at the next 2 tribals, with Evie also throwing a vote at Liana by the end to try to save themselves. Now, I know what you're saying. This alliance only voted together once, maybe twice, and then they turned on each other in a brutal betrayal by the merge vote, and they are the 7th best women's alliance in global Survivor history? Yeah. Buckle up, folks. At number 8, we have an alliance that formed for exactly 1 vote in Survivor Cook Islands. At the final 17, the women of the Rarotonga tribe, Parvati, Jenny, Rebecca, Stephanie, and Christina, worried that there might be an all-male power structure on their tribe, so they teamed up to blindside JP. They managed to also pull in male tribe mates Brad and Adam for the vote, but I counted it as a women's alliance because this move seems to be entirely spearheaded by the women, and the men just hop on the winning side when it becomes clear what's happening. This one-time alliance then immediately turned on each other at the next tribal council, with all of the women unanimously voting out Stephanie the next round. This alliance never again becomes relevant after this tribal, but this one-round success story still makes number 8 on the list. At number 9 is an alliterative Bello women's trio from Survivor 45, Kelly, Kendra, and Katura. This trio forms in episode 1 and lasts until the final 10. So why is it so low? Well, the Belo tribe never goes to tribal council before the tribe swap, and then they get separated in the swap, so it's not until the merge that they get a chance to vote together. At the merge vote, Kendra and Katurah are both immune, so there's not really any opportunity to test loyalty, and all three participate in the unanimous vote on Caleb, which is not spearheaded by any of the three of them, and in fact is not their preferred option.
Didn't we say, like, was Belo plus Caleb? Or who are you voting?
Caleb, because Caleb's going.
I'm not.
Okay.
As part of the plan, I'm voting Jay. My vote will say Jay tonight, 100%.
Okay.
In the next round, the three are separated again at the split tribal. Katurah votes out Caleb with her group, while Kelly and Kendra go along with the majority to unanimously vote out Sifu on their side. So now we get to the final 10, the first real opportunity for this trio to exercise its power and vote together, and all three of them get blindsided when Kelly goes home. Katurah and Kendra had no involvement in Kelly's blindside, and so it is that this completely ineffective alliance that basically never did anything, by merit of them all staying alive for half the game as a unit and never turning on one another, is somehow one of the better women's alliances in the show's history. So let's wrap up the top 10 with a motley crew from the show's first men versus women season, Survivor the Amazon. The group of Christy, Dina, Heidi, Shauna, and Jenna fit in here. This is an extremely messy alliance. They were all placed on the female tribe, so any possible alliance had to consist of all women. Essentially, this is the group that controls the first 2 votes on the Jabiru tribe in episodes 2 and 4, and then kinda works together for the rest of the game. And I say kinda because it's hard to neatly define this alliance. Christy defects to vote for Jenna in episode 2, and Shauna defects to vote for Christy in episode 4. Shauna asks to be voted out at one point, but is denied by her alliance. Then in episode 6, Jenna and Dina both turn on Shauna, who now doesn't want to go home, in order to side with Rob and Matt and split up Alex and Shauna. Jenna, Dina, Heidi, and Christy all voted together for the 2 merge votes, and then at the final 8, Jenna and Heidi turn on Dina with the other men, leaving only Dina and Christy out of the vote. If there was an alliance still, it broke after that. Christy helps Rob, Matt, and Butch blindside Heidi and Jenna at the final 7, and then Jenna and Heidi help Rob and Matt blindside Christy at the final 6. Now with just Jenna and Heidi, the last 2 girls left, they stick together, though Heidi does still get voted out in 5th, and Jenna goes on to win the game. And I will say, for as messy as they were throughout the season, all of the women in this alliance do give Jenna their jury votes at the end. So yeah, this is an alliance that frequently votes against and betrays each other, often isn't on the same page, barely fits the definition of an alliance, but they work together more than they don't, and in the end, they put aside their differences to ensure a woman wins. Because of how tenuous this alliance was at times, I couldn't really justify placing it much higher than here, but the Jabiru women sneak into the top 10. Number 11, you guys are really going to start laughing at me now. The 11th best women's alliance in Survivor history is the women of the Cagayan Brains tribe. J'Tia, Cass, and Tasha didn't get off to the best start since Cass tried to vote J'Tia out at the first tribal council, but the 3 come together after a wild series of events to blindside Garrett at the season's 2nd tribal council. Though the 3 women planned to stick together against Spencer, J'Tia managed to wear out both Cass and Tasha over 2 rounds despite her promises of loyalty, and by the next time they went to tribal council, she was voted out. Cass and Tasha stuck together for the rest of the pre-merge before Cass switched sides at the merge, and they spend the rest of this season, as well as the next season they played together, as enemies. They are the 11th best women's alliance in the show's history. At number 12, we have the Coyopa Women's Alliance from episode 1 of Survivor San Juan del Sur. You see, Nadia, Val, Baylor, and Jacqueline realized from day one that as a minority of 4 women against 5 men, they needed to stick together to prevent one of them from being voted off to quote-unquote keep the tribe strong under John Rocker's leadership. But as you might be able to assess, 4 out of 9 does not win. Which is to say, this budding women's alliance needed a 5th member, a man, to win the first vote. Now you might say, if they pulled in a guy, wouldn't that make it not a women's alliance? And you would be right. This remains a women's alliance because they failed at recruiting the necessary male numbers. This is also the women's alliance that tried to recruit Josh because as a gay man, he was one of the girls, which, you'll never believe this, an ineffective recruiting strategy. Baylor also turns on this alliance at the first vote, so they didn't even get through one vote before falling apart as a unit. Nadia was voted out, Val was voted out the next round, and by episode 3, half this alliance was out of the game. I will give the minorest of points to Baylor and Jacqueline for surviving until the final 5 and moving together as usually allies for the rest of the game. But as an alliance of 3+ women, hard to see this as much more than an abject failure. It's less of a failure than some of the other one-round women's alliances, though, because they never actually did have the numbers on their side. And this was sort of always how it was going to work out. And still, they're in the top half of women's alliances in the show's history. At number 13 is the Merged Tribe Women's Alliance proposed at the final 10 of Survivor 45 between Kelly, Kendra, Katurah, Emily, Julie, and Dee. At the final 10, the women outnumbered the men 6-4, and it was proposed that they should form a girls' alliance to take out the men.
It's 6-4 right now. This could be our opportunity for these 6 badass women to start taking out some guys.
It is unclear exactly how much Julie and Dee were entertaining this. It seems like they're into it as a short-term plan, but maybe not as a long-term one. However, what was clear right away is that Emily was not into it at all, and the alliance was doomed almost as quickly as it began when she ratted it out to Drew and Austin.
So I'm going to tell you something.
Okay.
And I might need you to not tell anyone.
Yeah, for sure.
There's an all-girls thing going on. Jake and Bruce are kind of like targets
number
A
1.
and B. Yeah.
Who took this information and used it as a reason to blindside Kelly that night, rather than taking out Jake and giving the women even more of a majority.
9th person voted out and the 2nd member of our jury, Kelly.
Whoa! Sorry. Whoa.
What the hell, guys?
Dee and Julie both joined in with Emily on this vote against Kelly, and what started as a united women's majority turns into half of them voting against each other this round. It gets the minorest of points for containing the season's ultimate winner in Dee, even if that winner was one of the ones who betrayed the alliance. Number 14 is maybe one of the most iconic failed women's alliances. At the final 7 of Survivor Palau, Katie, Karen, Jen, and Steph try to team up against the 3 men who were leading the game.
Who would be the first one you'd want off? If he doesn't have immunity, you should probably try to get him off.
So what would you rather do, Karen? Stick with the women and take out the men? Or go with the men and take the rest of them kicking our ass in a big way?
McCarran felt loyal to Tom and wasn't down with the all-women thing, so she ratted them out. That leads to this iconic line.
We can't get a female alliance together because Karen sucks.
Karen's betrayal kills the alliance quickly, and Steph is voted out that round unanimously. I don't think it's even worth discussing how this affected the women for the rest of the season, because the alliance is dead at that point, but for what it's worth, the target this round, Tom, ends up winning the whole game. This hilariously short-lived alliance didn't even last until Tribal Council around it was created in the mind of any of its members, and it never influenced a single vote, with all of them voting for each other that round. At number 15, we have another women's alliance from Survivor Second Chances. On the Swap Tribe Bion, Monica tries to form an all-girls alliance with Kelly Wigglesworth and Kimmy Kappenberg. If this worked, they would have had 3 of the 6 votes on their tribe. Kelly even votes according to this plan. Unfortunately, Kimmy shuts this down and convinces Monica to vote for Kelly at that tribal, and then immediately rats Monica's plan out to Jeremy and Steven.
Okay. And I said, so just what's your opinion on Spencer or Kelly? And she's like, well, don't you think we need to keep our women's numbers up?
This leads to Monica being blindsided 3-2-1 in the very same round where she proposed the plan. This women's alliance never really gets off the ground. They could have had numbers, but it was dicey and never formalized, so I don't penalize this as harshly as other women's alliances that fall apart immediately. An alliance has never existed less than the 16th place women's alliance on our list from Survivor 47.
Like, we all one more vote, guys, and we make it. What are we gonna do, though? I think we gotta get a boy out.
Exactly. I would love for all of the women to make it to the jury.
Dude, that'd be.
I would love, and we have the power to do it.
Teenie pitches an alliance of all the women in the game to Rachel, Sierra, and Tiana, who seem receptive. However, I'm not even convinced based on the edit that Caroline, Sue, and Genevieve even know that this alliance existed, even though they were pitched and counted as part of its numbers. It doesn't really matter though, because everyone seems to forget about it almost immediately when the players get split up into 2 tribes again for 1 round. The group going to tribal ends up being majority women, with Caroline, Rachel, Sue, and Tiana having numbers over Gabe and Kyle. But that doesn't matter. Rachel's targeted by all of the other women, and when Rachel gets saved by Saul, Tiana becomes the new unanimous vote. And now we are in the bottom 10 worst women's alliances. Let's go. So earlier at number 3, we talked about the Vanuatu Women's Alliance that won the first vote and took control of the game. At number 17, may I introduce the Vanuatu Women's Alliance that lost the first vote and completely bungled the game. Dolly, Mia, Lisa, Julie, and Eliza form an alliance of young women early on Yasser, but after Dolly wavers about whether to be loyal to this alliance or to the other group, Eliza just decides to swing herself to the other side to take out Dolly. She doesn't seem to realize that by doing this, she has doomed her side long term, but she does. Eliza tries to still work with Julie and Mia to take out Twyla, but Lisa flips this time, sending Mia home. And then after the tribe swap, Eliza's convinced by Leanne and Amy to take out Lisa over Rory 4-2, killing the alliance. Only Julie and Eliza make the merge. Julie manages to integrate herself well into the women's alliance. Eliza does not, but is still a reliable number for 3 votes. And at the final 7, Julie votes for Eliza, while Eliza joins in the blind side on Leanne. Eliza does not, however, vote for Julie at final 5, and both are voted out in 4th and 5th place. At number 18 is the Day 1 Women's Alliance on Mindanao from Survivor South Africa, Philippines. The 5 women of Stacey Lee, Jean, Mariska, Tony, and Katinka have the majority on their starting tribe of 9, with just 4 men in the minority. The women agree that they need to stick together and form an alliance.
Guys don't have to tell you anything, eh? You can make decisions, right? Alpha males do not run this place. I am literally going to come across as a man-hater on this show. Oh well.
But Katinka reveals the existence of the Women's Alliance to PK, allowing PK and Tevin to flip the tribe against Sean and Stacey Lee.
They came up with an all-girl alliance.
Really?
Because they got the majority.
PK tells me about the all-girl alliance, and now my mind is racing.
At the first tribal, the rest of the tribe plans to vote out Jean, but then instead, they end up voting out Stacey Lee after she asked to be voted out due to feeling sick. All the women end up voting for her according to her wishes, and after this, the Women's Alliance was never materially important to the season again. This is kind of like the Survivor San Juan del Sur Day 1 Women's Alliance, but if they actually had a numbers majority at the beginning and then gave it away for no real reason. At number 19, we have the Breadwinners Alliance from Survivor 47, featuring Annika, Rachel, and Sierra. This alliance forms early on, possibly as early as episode 2, and loops in Sam as an affiliate, but not a true member. However, at the first vote this new trio faced, Sam convinces Sierra to turn on Annika rather than Andy, the tribe outcast.
Looking at her in her eyes, and I'm like,
I know.
I feel like a piece of crap.
I know you do.
How am I gonna...
One possible contributing factor to this decision may have been that Annika lost her vote, making it a 2-2 tie if Sam had absolutely refused to vote for Andy, though at least based on the show edit, that doesn't seem to be the case. Regardless, Sierra blindsides Annika, dissolving the alliance. When Sierra was blindsided a few episodes later, Rachel was not involved in it and used her shot in the dark to avoid casting a vote for anyone at all at that tribal council, meaning that she never betrayed either of her Breadwinners' allies. Maybe the universe rewarded that rare bit of Women's Alliance loyalty with a series of lucky breaks that led to her eventual win. Regardless, the Breadwinners' Alliance that never voted together and immediately turned on itself ends up here on the list. At number 20 is the Charlie's Angels Alliance from Survivor 46, which has a very similar arc as the Breadwinners from 47, but I put this one lower because the All-Women Alliance literally named themselves after a man on their tribe. Anyway, Maria, Mariah, and Jem formed this alliance on day 1, and then loop in Charlie as an affiliate. Mariah and Jem are loyal to this alliance. Maria claims to be loyal in interviews, but the facts are this. The first time Maria gets the opportunity to write down someone's name, she writes down Jem's and blindsides her. The second time Maria gets the opportunity to write down someone's name, she writes down Mariah's. Turns out, your fun women's alliance is only as strong as its weakest link. At number 21 is a women's alliance from Australian Survivor Brains vs. Brawn 2. but not the one you might be thinking of. That one's coming later. This alliance is the Girls Gone Wild alliance, formed by Laura, Zara, Kate, and Morgan during the tribe swap. Kate and Morgan go to Laura and Zara, who are on the bottom, with a new alliance idea to flip on the men of the post-swap Brains tribe, giving them a majority. Well, assuming they loop in Miles. The four have plans to reunite with Laura's other female allies at the merge. All four of them are enthusiastic about this Girls Gone Wild alliance, and they make plans to vote out Jesse that night. However, before Tribal Council, Laura gets paranoid and doubts the alliance, and then she finds an advantage that gives her information that someone will be able to flip to the other tribe at that night's Tribal Council. She intends to use this opportunity to abandon her new allies, leaving them down in numbers, and tells Zara about it. Zara tries to stop her since this will destroy their Girls Gone Wild plan and also leave Zara in a terrible spot. When Laura is unswayed, Zara pitches at Tribal Council to get herself sent away rather than Laura. She is successful, and this puts a permanent wedge between Laura and Zara. This also burns their bridge with Kate and Morgan, who feel betrayed by the two women, resulting in them siding with AJ after the merge rather than the women. What's remarkable about this one is how fast and dramatically this alliance falls apart in the same episode that it was created in, even in a round where no one ends up being voted out of the game. And that brings us to our bottom 5. But before we dive into those, I'd like to talk through a few honorable mentions. Alliances that feel like they should be part of this list, but don't qualify for one reason or another. First up, we have the weird multi-headed Hydra alliance of mostly women that Parvati and Cirie work with throughout Australian Survivor vs. the World. Now this one's difficult because basically the merge is 8 women and 2 men, and Cirie and Parvati work with many different groups of women throughout, but with very little consistency. It feels like a women's alliance, but the alliance is just sort of Cirie and Parvati and whoever they deign to work with. The closest thing to an actual structure is Cirie, Parvati, Lisa, Cass, and Tommy, but A, Tommy's part of that, even if almost everyone, including Tommy, knows he's at the bottom of that 5, and B, Cirie and Parvati cannibalize that alliance and take out 3 of the 5 members as soon as they have numbers. So it's not a particularly effective women's alliance, even if you count it as one. You could also try counting the merge alliance of Cirie, Parvati, Shawnee, and Kirby, but Parvati and Cirie turn on Kirby at the very next vote, and Shawnee and Kirby turn on Cirie. The core group of Parvati and Cirie do excellent work on their way to the Final 4, working with mostly female allies, but I can't really count it as a women's alliance for the purposes of this exercise. Likewise, there's 2 major Aubrey alliances that are mostly women, but not entirely. The biggest alliance that feels missing from this list to me is the Co-Wrong Women's Alliance from 32, the one with Aubrey, Debbie, Sydney, Julia, even Michelle, and also Joe. Basically, this is the group that votes out Nick at the merge and then becomes a de facto, if unruly, majority alliance against the clear minority of Scott, Jason, and sometimes Ty. Julia openly defects, Michelle plays the middle. This one's really hard because it feels like an all-women's alliance, and people on the season even talk about it as it being, it's the men versus the women, and everyone just forgets that Joe Del Campo is absolutely here and a loyal, full-fledged member of this alliance from its earliest days all the way until he gets medevaced at 5. It's not a true women's alliance. I'm sorry. We also need to talk about the Game Changers Alliance, led by both Cirie and Aubrey, which also features Sarah, Michaela, and Andrea. I'm not really counting this because this alliance originally contained Zeke and Ozzy and didn't contain Michaela. Michaela joins at the merge, but that's when Sarah flips against Ozzy at the vote where most of them turn on Zeke. Sarah flips back to this group, and Zeke rejoins long enough to take out Debbie, but then they flip against Zeke the next round. You can make a case at this point that it's a true women's alliance of Aubrey, Michaela, Andrea, and Cirie, with Sarah as sort of a flipping affiliate, and they take out Sierra, but then they immediately turn on themselves by voting out Andrea, resulting in all of them going home in order, and none of them making the Final 4 besides Sarah, who's already jumped ship. It's kind of an edge case, but I would argue against this being a true women's alliance. It's a standard alliance that accidentally becomes a women's alliance for one round. And while we're here, let's talk about a couple female trios. On the first season of Australian Survivor, Brooke, Flick, and Elle work together for most of the game and make Final 6 together, before all turning on each other and none of them making Final 2. Now you might wonder why this one goes in honorable mentions, while the Champions trio of Abby, Janine, and Pia made the actual list. The truth is, Sam and Lee are part of this alliance the entire time they exist as a group. The women are leading it, but the men are an equal part of the alliance, so this feels more like Co-Wrong with Joe Del Campo and the women, more than like a trio of women who occasionally team up with men to accomplish votes. The other trio we need to discuss is from the American All-Stars season, where Jenna Maraska, Sheehan, and Kathy form a Mogo Mogo women's alliance very early on. However, this alliance is basically non-existent because Jenna quits before they ever go to a tribal council. It does have some lasting implications due to Sheehan and Kathy forming a duo that votes together at 5 tribals before being split up at the final 8. But though it starts as a trio, they're already a duo before they attend a single tribal council, and duos don't count as alliances, so I'm not including it here. Okay, I think that covers all the honorable mentions, so let's get into the bottom 5 women's alliances. The 5th worst women's alliance of all time is the women's alliance that started all in Borneo, the one we talked about at the top of the video, that Sue immediately betrays, that sends Sonia home first and Stacy home soon after, that ends in Sue refusing to give Kelly her jury vote and handing the first ever Survivor title to a man. I don't think I need to explain more why that's a pretty bad women's alliance. The 4th worst women's alliance of all time is the women of the swapped Galang tribe on Blood vs. Water. Now, after the tribe swap, Vetus and Katie get swapped onto a tribe that's otherwise all women from the same starting tribe: Tina, Kat, Laura B, and Monica. That's not a problem for Katie, who reunites with her mom Tina and is welcomed into the alliance with open arms. It is a problem for Vetus, the only man standing with no strategic or social connection to any of these women. Open and shut case, right? Or, as you've already figured out, Vetus will be completely safe for 2 consecutive tribal councils because he is up against a women's alliance. This alliance of 5 women on a 6-person tribe takes out 2 of their own rather than strike at Vetus. In the first round, Kat decides now is the time to turn on Monica, which leads the rest of the women to turn on Kat.
Please stay together, guys, please.
And we will stay together, and we will stay strong.
In the second round, the women turn on Laura B. And in the next round, at the merge, Monica betrays Katie and Tina, the last 2 members of this alliance, to work with Tyson and Jervis instead. But don't worry, Katie and Tina do hold that against Monica, denying her their jury votes at the end.
Bravo to you. That was a great move. Monica and Tyson, you won the battle, but you didn't win the war because you've got 5 jury votes that you'll never get for flipping.
It is a mess from top to bottom, but my understanding is that there may have been some pre-game factors playing into this that aren't mentioned on the show, so I don't knock this quite as heavily, but it's real bad. The 3rd worst women's alliance of all time is from Survivor South Africa, Island of Secrets, where we have the women's trio of Steffi, Nicole, and Letitia that forms at Final 7. After having since talked into her by her best friend on a loved one's reward, Steffi comes up with a plan to get the 3 women to the end and turn against the alliance leader, Rob. At Final 7, they determine it is too soon to make a move, and they decide not to vote against Rob, but they stick together for a different vote. Rob then wins the Final 6 and Final 5 immunities. At Final 5, the women were going to vote out Darao and try again at 4 for Rob, but Letitia gets sort of cagey about an advantage she receives. This spooks Nicole, leading Nicole to rat out the entire women's alliance to Rob and flip against them.
It's a great brand opportunity. Stand up for women. Be this shining beacon of light, this first historic women finale. But what are you if you don't celebrate the men that lift the strong woman? Wow. And all you've done this whole time is take strong women with you in your wake.
Steffi and Letitia have their games put on blast at that tribal, and Steffi is humiliated and then eliminated.
I believe that this belongs to courageous, secure men. Men like Nathan, men like Rob, and men like Darao. And I'd like to play this idol tonight for Darao.
You betrayed the amigos.
Who's black?
17th person voted out of Survivor SA Island of Secrets and the 9th member of our jury, Steffi.
Letitia is then voted out in 4th place. Now, if it seems like Nicole undermined the other women in order to save herself, don't worry. When asked about this, Nicole explains that her throwing the other women under the bus to Rob makes her a good feminist because Rob empowers women.
I don't believe in woman empowerment at the expense of men, especially not men that are helping uplift and empower strong women. And I have gotten to where I've gotten in this game because of people like Rob.
And you're never going to believe this, but Letitia doesn't vote for Nicole after hearing this argument, but Steffi does. Letitia's one missing jury vote, though, makes all the difference, and Nicole loses to Rob 4-6 in Final Tribal Council. So to recap, this Women's Alliance came together to vote out one man, decided not to vote for him once, never again got the opportunity, and then ate itself alive in the name of feminism. Honestly, there's very little difference, though, in my mind, between the number 13 and number 24 Women's Alliance in this ranking. Most of these are just groups that tried and failed to come together for a single vote, and often resulted in targeting each other for no real reason. They barely exist, and they are so bad primarily due to their ineffectualness, their lack of power and influence, and their short lifespan. But just as the Black Widow Brigade and Kim's Women's Alliance lifted the boats of all involved, the two worst women's alliances of all time drag everyone involved in them down. Once in a while, you get an alliance so bad that the worst thing that you can do for your game is agree to get involved in it. And these alliances are like that in two different ways. First, the one that's toxic and poisonous in a fun way. For those of you who have never seen Australian Survivor Brains vs. Brawn 2, may I introduce The Coven, the most dysfunctional women's alliance in Survivor history. It's maybe easiest to think about The Coven, in real-world terms, like a group of popular, successful women who all secretly seem to hate each other and gossip about each other behind their backs. Formed on day one, the Coven is the hottest of messes, and yet even though its members all constantly betray and backstab each other, they all keep coming back together like, now it's gonna work, or I need her to think it's still going. The Alliance votes together 5 times, but its members vote against each other or each other's interests at least 10 times. But the thing that makes the Coven so bad is this. Every single time a vote goes against a member of the Coven, it is at the hands of another member of the Coven. They just actively sabotage each other and cut the legs out from under one another so that none of its very capable members are ever able to get a stable position in the game. It's just a circle of self-sabotage that leads to the men running the season and the first all-male Final 3 in Australian Survivor's history. So let's break it down with a play-by-play.
We're sticking to the witchy vibes.
I'm happy with witchy vibe. You're gonna see us all around the campfire at night, like holding hands and chanting.
I'm not calling it like a coven, but if all the women gang up together, then
I mean, call it what you will.
In the very first episode, the women of the Brains tribe form the Coven. It's not all of them immediately, but they slowly invite each woman in. They are in control of the tribe, with 6 women strong, and the men intent on going after each other due to petty squabbles, which means they can take out whoever they like. So of course, in the next episode, Indy betrays the Coven because she is insecure that she wasn't part of the Alliance's initial formation, but more importantly, she isn't getting her way on the vote. Others are telling her who to vote for.
so we'll all go with Rich. Okay. Yeah.
Are you fine with that?
I am fine with that. What I'm not okay with just processing, to be honest, my concern is being a number and not actually a contributor to the conversation.
So Indy responds to this by telling the men of the tribe about the Coven and offers to vote with them against the women. Now the men, hilariously, do not believe Indy that the Coven is a real alliance. And more specifically, they have no interest in working with Indy. And why wouldn't they when she approaches them like this?
Because I tell you what, I'm safe as right now. So I'm putting my game and everything I stand for on the line right now. So if you me over, just remember, I'm black. We do periphery. I will comfort you, right? No, I'm serious.
So the men go to the women to tell them about this insane story that Indy has cooked up.
Indy? She just informed me and Max that everyone was against.
Said that.
Yeah. She told me not to trust any of you guys, that you're talking about getting rid of me.
And having been betrayed by Indy, the Coven betrays Indy back and votes her out unanimously. Oh, and at Tribal, Indy has the gall to complain that she is being excluded by the women.
So girl strong is not a thing.
You made it not a thing!
So it's not a great start. One vote in, and one coven member already has betrayed the group and been voted out. But the 5 remaining members promise loyalty to one another. This is the group that will control the tribe and then the game. At the next tribal, the coven, now only 5 out of 11, works together to vote out Kent. But there is lots of internal politicking and squabbling before the vote. Some members want Rich removed, but Laura forbids it, and then AJ targets Logan, causing Logan to want AJ out, and the other coven members refuse to vote AJ. Keep an eye on these fault lines. Now, shortly after this vote, the guys realized that maybe Indy was actually onto something when she talked about a women's alliance, and an all-male alliance called the Bomb Squad forms.
You saw how they just talked in a
Yeah, straight up.
We need to break the girls' culture.
Okay, none of us flip.
No.
Because this is it.
And we got a name now. It's Bomb Squad. All right? Bomb Squad. Kaboom.
The Brains win immunity, so the next time the Coven goes to Tribal is episode 5. Also worth noting at this point that a infrequently mentioned member of the Coven until now named Allie gets picked to go on a reward with the Braun tribe and proceeds to just spill all of the tribe's secrets, including the Coven's existence, to just the entire tribe for no reason.
There's a very clear alliance between the girls.
So the girls are strong, and then there's something.
Yeah, we have an alliance. Like, they're so loyal. Like, those girls will have your back no matter what.
I think we picked the right person, guys.
This is great gossip!
This, however, is far from the biggest problem that the Coven needs to deal with at the moment. Now that the numbers are back on their side, the other women put their feet down and demand that Rich be voted out.
Who would you prefer tonight?
Rich goes home today, AJ goes home next. That's my thing.
Right. I just don't think it's a fair trade between AJ and Rich.
I just think that it's illogical. I just think that AJ has attempted to gain momentum.
My main 5 are the Coven, but Karen is my number 1. Her and I are like this. This Rich vote is something that Karen and I are driving, and if the 2 L's don't come with us, that's going to be them burning the Coven.
I think that it's frankly emotional. I've given you my word. I'm not happy with it. I'm pretty pissed off. And now I feel like I have no agency. That's why.
And that's how Karen and I have felt the last 2 votes as well, when we didn't have any agency.
However, Laura, and possibly Logan, are so unwilling to vote out Rich that they are prepared to turn on the Coven and vote out their own rather than send him home.
You guys?
I know it's a big one. Yeah, it's just hard. Like, obviously, we want to be Coven strong, but, like, is that the best thing? But then it is the best thing. It's just a hard choice to make.
I love my Coven, but I've worked so hard on my relationship with Rich. He's this beautiful, big, shiny shield in front of me. I'm going to figure out a way to get him to stay.
I'm telling you, there's something building on our side.
What?
Well, Allie.
And now I have the choice to go against my Coven alliance.
Now, lucky for them, Tribal Council has a signature Australian twist. The person voted out will not leave the game, but instead be sent to the other tribe. Believing that Rich will be safe and can put in a good word for them to the other tribe.
As a witch, I've mastered the way of getting my way. This is perfect for me. Go over to the Braun's tribe and make some connections for me. Meanwhile, you're out of the Coven's hair and you're not annoying them anymore.
Laura and Logan get on board with the Coven and vote him off the tribe. The Coven, against its own wishes, stays intact and has a pure majority in the tribe. 5 allied women against 4 fractious, divided men.
Good luck. Bomb Squad, Bomb Squad.
Throughout these rounds, 2 pairs have been forming within the Coven, Zara and Karen, and Logan and Laura. So of course, before the episode 6 vote, with the numbers now firmly on their side, both pairs independently create new alliances with the men of the tribe and plan to turn on the Coven.
I think I want to move forward with the 2 boys, Kaylin and Max.
I feel really bad turning on the Coven. That's not something I
feel bad. No one likes to see their favorite girl band disband. I don't think I want to continue with the girls.
Yes.
The thing about working with Laura and Logan is, Laura
functions on fear and paranoia. Logan, she goes from 0 to nuclear in a millisecond.
The opportunity is there. If you guys are totally cool for you, AJ, and I to take control here.
Are we gonna jump?
I think we should jump. I think we've met the end. The end of the coven.
However, Max unexpectedly uses an advantage at Tribal Council to send home Laura and Karin, one person from each of the pairs, inadvertently preventing them from being able to betray each other at the vote. They go back to camp and pretend to be on good terms with each other. Meanwhile, of the remaining 3 Coven members at Tribal Council, Allie and Logan stick to the official Coven plan, which they weren't planning to do before but now have no choice but to do, and vote for Miles. If Zara stuck with the plan, Miles, the season's eventual winner, would go home here. However, Zara flips on the Coven and votes for Allie, sending her home 4-3. The Coven is down to 4 people.
So right now I'm pretending that I have dementia because I did exactly what I wanted to do, but I don't want to let anybody know that. I'm so sorry, Logan. You understand how confusing that was at the time? Yeah, I know that I didn't want to do that on purpose. Well, I'm so sorry.
In the midst of this chaos, the tribe swap happens. The 2 pairs are broken up once again, with 1 member from each pair going to the other tribe together. Laura and Zara remain on brains together in the minority, which means that Laura can't afford to be too mad at Zara for flipping and alienate one of her only numbers, while Karin and Logan go to the new Braun tribe together in the majority. Again, each of these pairs either betrayed or planned to betray each other at the previous tribal council, but has enough deniability to insist, no, the Coven's still going strong. It is insane. Logan and Karin largely stick together with the brains majority on New Braun and seem largely in lockstep with one another. This is, notably, the only time Coven members ever have a numbers majority and work together. Meanwhile, on the other tribe, Laura and Zara famously try to turn together on their own brain, Miles. They fail at that vote and end up on the bottom. This is when the Girls Gone Wild alliance that we mentioned earlier happens in the timeline, as they decide what would be really good right now is to try again at the all-women alliance that's clearly going so well. With Girls Gone Wild, Laura and Zara are now back in the majority. So, of course, this is when Laura finds an advantage that would send her to Braun, to the majority and to the rest of her alliance.
All I'm thinking when I'm reading the scroll is, how is this going to save me? It's going to feel so good to finally be at the top again.
So Laura tells Zara, I'm going to abandon you. And then she gets really surprised when Zara doesn't like that plan and isn't going to let Laura just screw her over.
I cannot catch a break in this game. It is so frustrating.
I want to minimize the hurt of my allies around me. But I found this advantage. This is a solo game. I'm going to use it. Sorry.
And so Zara pitches to the rest of the tribe that she should be the one that gets saved instead. So it comes down to a tribe vote of who will go to the other tribe. Laura and Zara technically both vote together for Miles, but only because they refuse to vote for one another, because that would help that person.
This is going to be the last time that Zara strong-arms me. This is not the way that I wanted to play it.
I believe I voted for you. This tips the balance of votes in my favor to go.
It's a 4-2 Zara-Laura split otherwise, with Zara winning out. Laura, then, salty that this whole plan has not worked for her, publicly badmouths Zara to both her ally Logan on Braun and to the rest of the new Brain tribe.
Okay, stop.
Okay?
Yeah.
You're right, dude.
He's up, Kaylin. He's up. Is he taking off? He's okay.
He's okay.
We love it when women support women. At this point, the tribes merge and the Coven reunites, and amazingly, they're still going to try to work together after everything. Maybe it helps that the margins are still very close and the numbers are unclear. All 4 Coven members are in on the Jesse-Polly split vote at the merge, and at the next vote, all 4 Coven members are in on the Polly vote, and then get collectively surprised by Miles' idol play. 7 of the final 11 are now women, and 6 of them are part of either the Coven or the former Girls Gone Wild alliance. In theory, the ball is entirely in the Coven's court. So of course, this is where they all turn on each other, as per usual.
I think that's going to be the best way. Yeah. Let's get it.
The plan is to get AJ and Miles, but obviously not doing that.
Zara picks now to blindside Logan in a Logan-Laura split vote. Karen warns Logan to play her idol, but still votes for her, just Coven things, rather than putting votes on AJ with Kristen, which would have changed the outcome.
13th person voted out, first member of our jury, Laura.
Because Logan plays her idol, her closest ally and Coven founder, Laura, goes home.
Yeah, they did, babe. Everyone voted for us.
Shit.
Yeah.
The next episode, there's a twist vote where a couple people get sent to a barren beach in order to isolate them from the rest of the tribe and make them perform worse in the challenge. Logan and Karen work together to vote to send AJ to Barren, but Zara votes for Logan, ensuring that Logan is the one that gets sent to Barren Beach instead. In episode 17, the final 10, is the last time that the 3 remaining Coven members vote together as they unify for a Miles and Polly split. Then, in episode 18, Karen gets targeted by Logan.
Put the votes on Kaz. Kaz has been controlling everything.
Yeah.
After she told me to play my idol that night.
She did tell you to play it.
Yeah, she did.
I knew it.
See, she's playing all the sides.
And the majority agrees, with votes split on Karen and Zara. Karen is secretly told to vote for Zara to save herself.
You vote Zara. Zara's going home, not you. Who's doing it? You and Zara. Who's doing this? Pretty much everyone. Really?
Instead, Karen decides to make a public declaration that she won't vote for Zara and throws a Hail Mary at Tribal Council, only to just secretly vote for Zara anyway.
I want to see what happens.
Hilariously, given Zara's willingness to blindside every other member of the Coven, Zara picks now to be very loyal and principled and refuses to vote for Karen. Karen still goes home anyway.
The tribe has spoken.
At this point, the Coven is basically over, and only 2 members are left, Zara and Logan. You would think now that they might set aside their differences and decide to... No, I'm just kidding. They both vote for each other and are so unbreakable in their desire to vote for each other that they almost go to rocks.
We're prepared to go to rocks for each other. So it wasn't about me knowing it was I.
So you will demand to go to rocks though, because you said that you're going to go to rocks.
No, we're ready to. Though.
They are
She's
ready
not demanding.
for me to go to rocks. I'm not saying you have to go to rocks.
Zara might demand it, I don't know, but I'm never going to ask you to do that. I would love to keep going if you'd have me, but I mean, yeah, just think about the integrity of the people that you're keeping.
Logan ultimately goes home here, and Zara is the last one standing from this hilariously cursed alliance. Zara carries on the legacy of the Coven by teaming up with 3 men, and then one by one voting out all 3 of the remaining women, Kristen, Morgan, and Kate. The last one, Kate, is especially notable here because Zara wins immunity that round, and all of the other players split their votes. It's a 2-1-1-1 vote where Zara is the 2 and can literally pick anyone she wants to go home without any risk or repercussion, including any of the 3 men who would all beat her at the end. So of course, she votes out the only other woman left in Kate, and is rewarded for this by being unanimously voted out by all 3 men together at the final 4.
I don't know what just happened, actually. I thought that I was better off keeping my trusted allies around me, but we can see how that's worked out.
And thus, we get our first ever finale in Australian Survivor history without any women left in the game. The Coven, everyone. truly an iconic women's alliance for all of the wrong reasons, and genuinely delightful to watch, which is why the Coven is number 2 and this next one is number 1, because beyond being incompetent and infuriating, it is a women's alliance that perpetuates actual harm against women. Let us now turn to the worst women's alliance in Survivor history, the Lyra Women's Alliance.
Looking around at the other players, I like the girls because it seems as though all 4 of the other women feel that they're not going to be subservient and that they're not going to do what people expect them to do. They're going to do what most benefits them.
Missy forms the Women's Alliance in episode 1, bringing in Chelsea, Karishma, Elaine, and Elizabeth. After taking out Ronnie at the first vote, the women have complete control of the numbers on original Lyra. However, the women do, let's say, a very poor job of making Karishma feel like a valued alliance member. This includes letting Karishma be the decoy vote in episode 3 and socially isolating her. This causes Karishma to basically defect, and the other women continue to frequently float her as an option. Despite this, Missy frequently protects Karishma strategically. So instead, the women vote out Vince, a man who openly expresses his interest in backing the women no matter what this episode, in order to keep Dean, Tom, and Aaron, who don't trust the women, instead.
The girls are really coming together and really bonding. That worries me, because there's 4 guys, there's 5 girls. They can easily get together and say, we can just pick these guys off one at a time. What do we need them for? So we need to make sure that that tribal dynamic does not happen.
The wheels start to come off in episode 4, when Chelsea is voted out unanimously by the women over fears that her showmance might compromise the women's alliance, despite said showmance, Dean, also being a possible voting option who had no protection. No, they take out Chelsea instead of Dean, and as Chelsea was the one holding the idol, this also takes the idol out of the hands of the alliance. Chelsea herself votes for Karishma at this tribal. I mark this as the formal end of the alliance, though the block of Missy, Elizabeth, and Elaine all swap together and remain a united block. Karishma is swapped away and connects to the other tribe, formally switching alliances and staying alive that way. There's even talk of a potential women's alliance forming on this tribe, but it is shot down by Janet, who has no interest in gender-based alliances or things of that nature.
I'm gonna play the woman card here. We are strong, smart, independent women. At what point in the game do we start having our own game? Like
when we get to the merge.
Nora is all about a girls' alliance, pro-women, you know, rah, 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 and we're not doing that.
Remember this. On the swapped voci, Missy and Elizabeth both observe the touchy behavior of their new tribe mate, Dan.
We all seem to get along fine, but Dan does some pretty weird, uncomfortable things.
It was a danger zone. Don't feel violated.
Who is this? Oh,
Oh God.
with a smile.
I mean, last night it was. Oh no, last night. Is this okay? It was no, it was I was like, sure.
Oh.
Is this okay?
Remember this too. When they go to a vote, Missy and Elizabeth plan to betray Elaine in order to avoid a tie or rocks, and they only don't do so because Elaine surprises them with a secret advantage that guarantees her alliance's success.
We were basically offering up Elaine as a sacrifice, but because she can save us, now she's our hero.
Aaron, who was repeatedly saved by the women, also plans independently to betray them here and is prevented from doing so by Elaine's twist. It all goes extremely sideways at the merge, which is simultaneously the Alliance's greatest triumph strategically and the biggest reason they're here at number 1. See, Dan has been accused of sexual harassment by another player. Missy and Elizabeth have experienced this behavior firsthand.
I was next to him, and he would have his hand right here, and he'd be like, hey, is this okay? And I'm like,
No. If you have to ask,
but like I want to
probably
right.
For my mental health, he can go.
He literally has done these things to 5 different women in this game. That sucks. That totally sucks.
Come to me and I will make sure that stops.
Okay.
Production interrupts the game to tell players that formal complaints have been leveled over sexual harassment. If they don't name against who, it's probably not hard for the players to figure out.
When I first got here, Dan was like super kind and super helpful.
Yeah.
But then one night, like, the hands were wandering.
Was he doing that with Elizabeth too?
With everybody.
Missy also talks to Kelly, a player from the other tribe, who talks about being sexually harassed by Dan like Missy was.
Day 1, I refused to sleep next to Dan.
Like, literally, everyone's like, Kelly doesn't like touching people. You know why I don't like touching people? Because Dan kept touching me. And so then I had to be like, I don't like touching people. Like, please don't touch me. And he still touches me.
And they bond over the shared experience.
It's a game, so I'm assuming nobody would want to say something because you can't make a scene, right?
Yeah. It's super upsetting because it's like, you can't do anything about it.
Kelly and Missy agree that it should be Dan. Others come on board with this. Karishma, Jamal, and Janet all decide to put game aside for an easy vote to take out a problematic player.
I know.
Especially after that meeting today.
Well, I've been trying to take care of all you girls. You know that, right?
Janet, who turned down a women's alliance earlier, says there's some things that are more important than the game. It's important to her to protect the young women.
When Jamal told me that we were going to vote Dan out tonight, I felt a great deal of relief because some of the girls have come to me upset about being in his presence. I cannot ignore these girls. I am going to be watching, and if I see anything, I'm going to confront.
Kelly opened up to me about how her and Molly felt very uncomfortable. I told her that we felt very, very similar and that we could all band together to get Dan out.
But Missy and Elizabeth also believe Kelly to be a dangerous player, and they aren't sure they trust this plan.
Your plan is to vote you. That is their plan. And Kelly, knowing that, pulled you aside for 2 hours.
But why would she pull me aside then?
To try to make you feel comfortable, don't you?
If Kelly thinks that she's gonna get me out, the very first merge vote, I feel as though that warrants me to try to make a move. I can't go out like a punk.
They decide to flip the vote onto Kelly to save Dan. And Dan's allies in Tommy and Lauren, as well as Dean, are more than happy to jump on board with this. Kelly is blindsided in every sense, as are the people who supported her.
And my mind just was racing because this was a vote not based on the game so much based on standing up for what was right. I was trying to do something for all you girls.
Yeah.
This wasn't even my intention.
And I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. I just don't know that I was ready to deal with what was going on. And I'm woman enough to say that.
Okay. I was willing to jeopardize my game because these girls were in such a panic from what I understood.
Now, after this vote, Missy, Elaine, and Elizabeth collectively gaslight Janet into believing that Dan has done nothing wrong to justify their vote.
Something that's been taken and it's been misconstrued.
Right.
But it's not happening here.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
I'm on the island, he's usually under control.
Right, exactly. But when you were gone, Missy and I were like, we haven't slept in 12 days.
The merge is about numbers. And so right now my job is to do whatever it takes to get on the right side of the numbers. The original Vokai are not the biggest fan of Dan. And so if I can play up that card in whatever way possible, I'll do it.
Did you or did you not do that?
Back. Oh, from
and how uncomfortable you were. And thank God I was back.
Yeah, I did say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dan, did you hear that?
Uncomfortable with me?
Yeah. Go away from you so you don't have to have me.
Just know that we are fine. And some things that I needed to say needed to be said. I heard.
That's what I thought. Okay.
This new merge alliance, bonded over the experience of voting Kelly together, decide to go after everyone who defended her at the previous tribal council.
I am now gone from this wonderful, loved person to the scourge of the earth.
While the majority vote for Jamal, Elaine, Elizabeth, and Missy split their votes on Janet and Karishma, while Karishma casts a self-preservation vote on Janet. Neither Janet nor Karishma goes home, but Janet does have to play her idol, and Jamal is voted out by the majority.
Jamal, the tribe has spoken.
And just like that, welcome to the final 11. It's time for a split tribal. After Aaron is voted out by the Vokai majority, we are at the final 10. And 7 of those final 10 are women. Now, of course, this means nothing because we know someone like Janet would never support women the way that this alliance has by being in a women's alliance. But lucky for them, the 4 remaining members of the Lyra Women's Alliance, Karishma, Elaine, Missy, and Elizabeth, are gifted a split tribe with all 4 of them plus Tommy, the other side's leader, a strong challenge competitor, and the eventual winner of the season. Even if you don't count Karishma as being part of the alliance at this point, and basically nobody does except Missy, you don't need her. The trio of Elaine, Missy, and Elizabeth fully control this vote.
I have been wanting to use Karishma in a way to elevate my game. And having Tommy gone opens up Lauren. It also means that we've gotten rid of a guy who can win the game.
So naturally, Elaine chooses now to flip against Missy, voting with Tommy and Karishma to destroy her own alliance.
Oh, it was you. That was the third vote, though.
Yeah. That's wild, E.
Difference isn't all, girl.
No, you know I was keeping you for the end.
Karishma is exultant, but she shouldn't be, because Missy was the only one sticking out her neck to protect Karishma strategically for most of this game, even if they didn't get along on a personal level. And it shows. At the very next vote, Karishma is voted for by 7 of her 8 tribe mates, including Elaine and Elizabeth. Karishma plays her idol, giving her, in her mind, complete control over who to send home. So who does Karishma target?
Janet. 1 vote Janet.
So yeah, Karishma has turned her back on the Lyros Women's Alliance because she felt that they didn't treat her well, worked with Vokai because they were nice to her until they left her out of the Kelly vote and ostracized her for working on the bottom. Karishma's been on the bottom ever since with Nora and Janet, who again was only on the bottom because she was willing to temporarily throw away her strategic game and vote for someone who considered her an ally in order to protect a young woman from being sexually harassed. Karishma tries to take Janet out with her idol play. It doesn't matter though. Dan put a stray vote on Elizabeth in case of idol shenanigans, causing a 1-1 tie and revote, during which Elizabeth is unanimously voted out over Janet. Yes, unanimously. Karishma changes her mind to vote for Elizabeth rather than Janet on the revote. We can only wonder why. And Elizabeth, who convinced the women to save Dan and who led the gaslighting of Janet to ostracize her, ends up going home primarily by Dan's hand. Though, of course, Elaine and Karishma are there holding the knives in their hands too. Karishma and Elaine, the last 2 remaining, are summarily voted out at the next 2 tribals, having voted out all of their allies. Karishma tries to vote out Nora, but Elaine refuses and votes out Karishma, sending her home. Big shout out to Elaine, who was voted out doing what she loved, voting for women.
You're crazy as hell.
From the merge onward, she voted exclusively for other women, and 6 of her 11 votes in the game were cast for women who were in her alliance. At the next tribal, Elaine tries to vote for Nora, as there are no remaining members of her alliance left, but she is voted out 5-2. The only person backing her up at the end? Dan. Oh, for the record, when it comes to the jury, none of the 4 women who claim to want a female winner vote for Nora in the end. Tommy and Dean get all the votes. I'm not saying they should have voted for Nora. I'm just saying they didn't. And that is the story of the worst women's alliance in Survivor history, in contrast to, I think, one of the last great heroes in Survivor history, Janet. If we're looking for a silver lining in this story, I think Janet is a great example of how to live out your values and your ethics, to advocate for justice for the victims of real-world oppression even within the game of Survivor. It doesn't require making an all-women alliance to advocate for women. Sometimes that spark of courage to believe a woman in need comes from the person who turned down an all-women's alliance. I think that's pretty beautiful. Given the nature of Survivor's politics and the people they cast today, I don't know if we'll ever get an ugly culture clash again like the one we got on Island of the Idols, where real-world ethics are challenged by the prospect of winning $1 million. I don't know that I want a conflict like that again. But it's nice to see that even when an alliance of professed feminists are willing to throw a hurting woman under the bus to win a TV show, there are others who won't. There are real heroes. Ever since Richard Hatch won Season 1, Survivor has been the territory of villains, the people who would do whatever it takes to win. Fans clamor for modern Survivor to bring back villains, but they don't see that the villains never left. Everyone's a villain now. Nobody's a hero in the new era. Not in the original sense. In old school vernacular, heroes aren't just people you root for or fun characters. They're people of principle who believe that there are things that you simply cannot do for $1 million. People who wouldn't create alliances, who wouldn't lie, who wouldn't gaslight away sexual harassment. And by that definition, Janet Carbon may be the last true hero in Survivor history.
It's really hard for me because I really, really do like Dan. However, this is the moral decision that I'm making. I just have a personal, emotional need to have these girls feel okay. So I'm going to do what's best for them.
We started this video with one of the most iconic villain alliances of all time in the Black Widow Brigade, who reveled in destroying the men in their path and made us revel in it too. And we end with a heroic woman who emerged as one of the lone bright spots in one of the darkest chapters of Survivor's history.
I allowed myself to get really hopeful because I was so close to having a possible dream come true. I feel really naive and stupid to think that I allowed myself to go further in my head that I had it, but I'm proud of the game I played just because it's who I am.
She's one of the most popular women to ever play Survivor. Come on out, Janet. She was the oldest and the most feared. Look at that.
Thanks for watching today. This one's a little different than some of the previous videos I've done, but I had fun putting it together, and I hope you guys had a good time watching it.